Maryam Ghani. I don't think I even know how to speak with a mic.
You're doing fine. Just to let you know.
Thank you very much.
Checker there. That's fine. Check.
Great.
Yeah, break a leg.
Have you ever heard of the expression, eyes are useless if the mind is blind? Me neither. No, I'm just kidding. I'm actually here to talk to you about this. Did you know that most of your eyesight is actually generated by your brain and not from your eyes? Vision is not just a recording of just what you see. It's not only what meets the eye. Your brain is the one that constructs, interprets, and makes up your reality for you. This is what we call perception. And this is what I want to talk to you about. This is only the technical part though. So when I was 21 years old, after a very spontaneous backpacking trip, and up until that age, I always thought the world was full of endless possibilities. I came back from that backpacking trip and I went to the doctor's for a checkup, the optometrist. It ended up with the specialist actually, handing me a box of Kleenex and telling me that I was slowly going blind. He said that little by little, I was losing my eyesight, and he couldn't give me a time frame on when that could happen. He suggested that I give up all my independent activities, such as walking alone at night, such as traveling, driving a car. He even thought that school would be too hard, and suggested I change my field of work. At the time, I was a makeup artist, ironically. I remember until this day, my father, he's Arab, he said to the doctor, "Doctor, can I please give her my eyes?" The words weren't necessarily what touched me. It's what I knew, what was behind them. It was the intention behind these words. I knew the love that my father had for me, and I'd never seen him tear up like this before. The one that I know, my father has grown up in a very tough environment. He went to war, he served 7 years in Iraq. I'd never seen him like this, so helpless. Let me tell you that when I left that clinic that day, I crossed the street and I didn't even want to look left or right. I didn't care anymore. I had nights where I would go to bed and I was afraid to close my eyes, and I would tell myself, okay, I'm about to close my eyes. Am I gonna see tomorrow? So, sorry, I'm kind of nervous. It's the first time that I talk about it so openly.
Above and beyond.
What's my next one?
Above and beyond.
Okay, so that gets really interesting now. Okay, this is the funny part. So I'd try to go above and beyond to hide my disability, because at this point, I didn't want people to lose that image of me, that I was strong and bubbly, and I didn't want them to think that I was hopeless and that I needed help. I was afraid to be that handicapped looking girl that needed help from everyone. I was afraid to lose my independence, my freedom. Little did I know, I was starting to limit myself. I started setting myself that mental barrier that actually made me start going blind. That mental barrier meant that I was limiting myself from the things that I desired the most. I was still traveling, but I wouldn't walk into places because I was so afraid that I would look clumsy. And I didn't have a white cane back then. I didn't want to look like I was lost. If it's an unfamiliar place, I did not want to walk in there. I would go to the gym and sit at that same old boring machine instead of going and doing what I loved the most, which was kickboxing.
Deep.
Let me give you an example of a situation where I really, really went above and beyond to hide it. It's a little delicate because I thought, how am I gonna ever tell this to a man? How am I gonna go on dates, you know? What am I gonna tell him? So I met this guy online, easy meeting, you know? I'm a person who loves meeting people face to face, so already it didn't start very well. I made sure to go to a place where I knew that I knew there were no stairs. It was bright, it was lit up. I knew exactly where the bathrooms were. I went there before him so he could find me. I FaceTimed my friend so she could look at the menu for me and told me exactly what I was ordering. It wasn't even something I liked. When he arrived, he shook my hand and I looked up and I have this thing where sometimes I gaze kind of on the side. So he looked behind him and he said, he's a French guy, so he's like, mais qu'est-ce que tu regardes, qu'est-ce que tu vois? And he's like, and I said, you know what? Aren't you an interior designer? That's a really cool ceiling. And then he looked at me and he said, it's a normal white ceiling, Maryam. And I said, oh, I don't know, I thought it was interesting the way it like reflected, you know? So he sat down and I thought this is gonna be a disaster. I could tell right there, you know? That was my sixth sense that was telling me that. And then I wanted to appear confident, so the waitress came and looked at the menu, and I pointed out exactly what I wanted, and then he said, you mean this? And he flipped the menu because obviously my menu was upside down, and I wasn't actually reading it. He really thought, at this point, my miscommunication, my lack of communication and transparency made him misunderstand me. And he probably thought I was so into him that I was really clumsy. But I was really not. It was the total opposite. It gets better though. So when the meal comes, we're talking and I'm trying to look quote unquote normal as I'm eating, trying to see what's on my plate. I had really long extensions back then. So as I was twirling my food around the fork, I didn't realize that I was twirling my hair with it too. So I picked it up and he looked at me and he said, mais qu'est-ce que tu fais? Tes cheveux sont enroulés sur ta fourchette. And I'm like, oh. So we could just make up the rest of it. There was no second date. It did get worse though. That was the best part. He then asked me to go to a bar. It was Saturday night and I said, no, let's go have coffee. It's Saturday, who goes to a bar? And he convinced me. So we ended up walking into a bar, we sat down, it was so comfortable. At this point I had made so much effort to not address that elephant in the room. Then I really needed to go to the washroom, so I said, this is gonna be a challenge. I have to wait until he goes so I can see where he's headed, so I can follow his trail. I did that. I made sure that I placed my bag right at the bar where he was, so it was a cue for me to say, okay, this is where I'm gonna find him. When I come out, I go to my bag, and I start talking to the guy. But little did I know, that was not my date. My date was standing behind me, looking at me, talking to another guy. So what happened there? What I really learned from this experience is that communication is important, but what's even more important is to communicate transparently with intention from your heart and to be genuine, to be true to yourself. At this point, I hadn't accepted that yet. I was still masking it. I found myself starting to isolate myself. I wasn't being myself anymore. That's when I started heading towards serious depression. And just about 2 years ago, other factors happened in my life that really pushed me to the edge. I realized that I had hit a wall. That same wall was also a crossroad for me. That's when I realized I had the choice to either give up everything and prove everyone right, or keep going. I remember that 21-year-old driving that quad bike on the top of the mountain in Greece with a visual impairment, not knowing that at the time. I thought I was just afraid to drive. So I fought that fear in my head and I said, this is all psychological. Keep driving. It's okay, you don't see the truck, don't worry about it. Just keep driving. I remembered that girl who thought the world was full of endless possibilities. And then I remembered what the doctor said. He was right. There were no possibilities to get a cure at that time. But what he was wrong about is that there were possibilities for me to do what I really and truly desired to do. I wasn't gonna drive a car, not just yet. I mean, in a couple of years maybe. But I wanted to drive my own life at this point. I wanted to take charge. And I said, if I'm gonna go this direction, then there's no way to come back. Whatever challenge comes along my way at this point, I've already stepped into that transformation process. So I decided to press the pedal and go full gear, if that's the way you say it, and go at 110%. There comes my next story for you. Fast forward a little bit before November, so last year, I went to a networking event that one of my childhood friends actually was organizing. That was the first time that I decided to go with my white cane. So what had happened, I missed a part. So what happened is that before that, I went to the MAB Mackay, which is a vision readaptation center. I took 2 years of my life to learn how to live again. I had to learn how to read and write with technology. I learned how to read Braille. It took me 6 months to learn Braille. I can even put it on my CV now. I had to learn how to walk almost, navigate the city, navigate the streets. I didn't even know my south from my north before. Now I'm the one giving directions, north and south and east and west of Sherbrooke. So I did my vision rehab. They gave me the white cane. I said, okay, now I have to pull off the Band-Aid one shot. I made this pact with myself. That's it. There was a promise made to myself. I can't go back. So I went to that networking event with that cane. I got a lot of judgment from people, including the people that were very, very close to me. People told me to hide my cane when we were taking pictures. Others asked me if I was going skiing. And that's serious, they really did. And others told me, Maryam, we know you for so many years, you don't need this. Why do you need this? You're fine without it. It's just because I realized what I had done is I had literally transformed myself, broke that barrier in my mind overnight, as what appeared to them was overnight. What was great about this networking event is that the guest speaker who was there, who was a contributor to the Huffington Post and who was an author, had written a book about a pilgrimage he did. He came to see me during the beginning of the event and he said, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm really happy that you're here. I don't know him. He said, I can't wait to talk to you. We need to talk. He said, my speech is about my book. And the book that I wrote was about a pilgrimage I did alongside a blind woman who had a white cane. That really gave me hope at that point. And I was so thankful that I actually brought that cane with me. And that cane, all of a sudden, that cane that was my barrier, that felt like it signified weakness before, sickness, it was not pretty. That same cane had now become my tool to break my barrier and to break the ice with people. That to me was a sudden start to transform. It was a transformation. And transformation in my heart, in my eyes, is something that you do that you cannot undo anymore. Let me give you an example before I finish my speech. In the world of psychology, there's an image that they show you. It's an image of a vase. So picture that. It's a vase. ask the patients, what do you see? The patients say, we see a vase. Is there anything else? No, it's a vase. Now look at it closely. Do you see a woman inside that vase? And all of a sudden they see it. Now every time you look at that picture, you will always see the woman in that vase. You can never unsee that anymore. This to me is an analogy to what my transformation was. So after that event, I knew that people reacted, and it wasn't a good reaction. That's when I knew that I was headed to the right direction, actually. I could see it crystal clear. Yeah, crystal clear. Ironically, it was, my vision had actually expanded. I could see more clearly.
5 years.
So, I don't know, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I don't know if I'm gonna lose my eyesight completely. I'm legally blind at the moment. I don't know if I can help anyone along the way. I don't know how many people I can help, if any. But I do know that one thing for sure is that by the time I get there, I feel like my vision will have gotten as clear as ever. And I hope that along the way, I can clarify other people's vision. Thank you.